My father has never once called me by my name at a dinner table when there were guests present. Not when I graduated summa cum laude from Georgetown Law. Not when I passed the bar on my first attempt. Not when I made partner track at 31, the youngest woman, the first in my family, the only one who had worked every single weekend for 4 years straight to get there. At those tables, I was always my daughter, said with a slight pause before it, the kind of pause that means the speaker is deciding whether to bother explaining further. Usually, he decided not to. I used to tell myself it was just his way, that some men of his generation don't know how to take pride in daughters the same way. I told myself that for a long time. You tell yourself things when the alternative is too heavy to carry. My name is Tessa. Tessa Carmichael. I'm 33 years old, and I'm a federal prosecutor for the Southern District of New York. That part matters. Hold on to it. My father built Carmichael Capital over 22 years. Private equity. The kind that doesn't advertise, doesn't need to. His clients found him through other clients, and his name in certain rooms carried the specific weight of someone who had never publicly lost. He wore that reputation the way other men wear watches, deliberately, always visible at the right angle. My stepbrother, my father's son from his second marriage, works at the firm, has since he was 24. His name is on the door of an office I was never offered, in a building I visited exactly twice as an adult before last spring. I want to be precise about that, not bitter. Precise. There is a difference, and it matters for what comes next. My mother left when I was 9. She didn't abandon me. I want to be clear about that too. She left my father, which is a different thing entirely, and she took me with her to a 2-bedroom apartment in Bethesda where she worked as a paralegal and made sure I had books and a library card and a mother who showed up. I owe everything that I am to that apartment. To her, my father paid child support on time. That is the full extent of his early involvement, and I used to give him credit for the punctuality. He re-entered my life at my law school graduation, stood with me for photographs, shook hands with my professors, told my torts professor that she gets it from my side. I smiled in those photographs. I know how to smile. He invited me to his firm's annual spring gala 2 months ago. Black tie, the Mandarin Oriental in Manhattan. 400 guests, most of them the kind of wealthy that doesn't need to mention it. He called me himself. That should have been my first signal that something was off. My father does not make his own calls. I want you there, he said. As family, you should know these people. I asked him why. Because someday it might matter, he said. I thought he was trying. People can surprise you. I have prosecuted enough cases to know that people are more complicated than the story you build about them, and I had spent years building the story about my father that left no room for him to grow. Maybe he was trying. Maybe it was time for me to let him. I went. I wore a navy dress I'd bought for a colleague's wedding and told myself it was fine enough. It was not fine enough, and I knew that the moment I walked in. My father met me near the entrance. He was already in conversation with 3 men I didn't recognize, and he turned slightly when he saw me, and he said, not to me but to them, the way you narrate a piece of the room. And this is my daughter. That pause, still there. One of the men smiled politely. Another glanced at me the way you glance at a decorative element. My father did not say my name, did not say what I did not say the word lawyer, or federal, or prosecutor, or any of the words that had taken me a decade to earn. She's in law, he added after a moment when the silence required something. The way you might say someone is in sales. I shook hands. I said it was nice to meet them. I excused myself to get a drink I didn't actually want. At the bar, I ordered sparkling water and stood there for a moment with my hand around the cold glass. I have stood in front of federal judges and delivered opening statements without my voice shaking. I have cross-examined witnesses who lied with complete confidence and broken them in under 20 minutes. I know how to stand still and breathe. I breathed. Then the man standing 2 feet to my left turned slightly and I saw his face, and everything in me went very quiet in a specific way. Not calm, but the way a courtroom goes quiet when something important just happened, and everyone is waiting to find out what it means. His name was Gordon Shea. I knew it because I had seen his photograph in a file that had been sitting on my desk for 6 weeks. Let me explain something about federal prosecution. You don't talk about your cases. Not at dinners, not at bars, not on the phone with your mother, not with colleagues outside your immediate team. The walls are real and they are there for reasons. I had been working on a financial fraud investigation involving a private equity firm with routing connections to shell entities in Delaware and the Cayman Islands, the kind of structure that takes two forensic accountants and a grand jury subpoena to untangle. Gordon Shea was not a target. He was, as of 6 weeks ago, a person of interest, a name on a wire transfer, a thread, and he was at my father's gala. I did not react. I am good at not reacting. I turned back to the bar and I breathed, and I let my brain do what it does, which is sort information very fast, in an order that is useful. Gordon Shea, at Carmichael Capital's annual gala. As a guest, from the look of it, not staff, not press, not a name on a seating chart that my father wouldn't have approved personally. I thought about the three men my father had been speaking to when I arrived. I thought about the way he'd introduced me as in-law, vague, dismissive, rather than by my actual title and employer. And then I thought about something colder. He had called me himself. He wanted me there, as family. You should know these people. Had he wanted me to see this, as a witness he thought was on his side? Or had he wanted me close enough that, if anything ever surfaced, he could say I had been there, had been part of his world, was in the circle? I don't know. I may never know. And I have learned over years of this work that you cannot prosecute a motive you cannot prove. What I could do was what I had been trained to do. I sent a text, not to local law enforcement, not to my supervisor. It was Saturday night, and what I had was an observation, not a warrant. I sent it to my colleague Daniel, who was co-lead on the investigation with me, and who I trusted completely, and who I knew would be awake, because Daniel is always awake. He sleeps 4 hours a night and considers this efficient. The text said, Gordon Shea is at the Carmichael Capital Spring Gala at the Mandarin Oriental. I'm here. I need you to cross-reference the Carmichael entity list against our open wires. Tonight. Daniel replied in 40 seconds. On it. Don't engage him. Don't leave. I stayed for 2 more hours. I ate a canapé I didn't taste. I watched Gordon Shea move through the room with the ease of a man who has never been watched in a way that mattered. He spoke with my father for 11 minutes near the east windows. I know it was 11 minutes because I was timing it. I did not look directly at them for more than 3 seconds at a stretch, which is a skill I developed in my second year of practice and have never stopped being grateful for. My father gave a short speech. He mentioned the firm's record year. He mentioned his son, my stepbrother, by name with affection, with pride, and said he was the future of Carmichael Capital. He smiled the way men smile when they are certain of things. He did not mention me. The gala ended at 11. I took a cab back to my apartment in Midtown and sat on my kitchen counter eating crackers and cream cheese and reading Daniel's messages as they came in. They came in for most of the night. By 2 in the morning, Daniel had found 3 overlapping entities. By 4, he had a fourth. A Delaware holding company with 2 principals. One of them a corporate attorney acting as a registered agent, the other a name that appeared once in a financial disclosure my father had filed with the SEC 4 years ago, buried in a footnote about advisory relationships. My father's name was not on the entities. That's how these things work. His name was never going to be on anything that could be found with a basic search. But there was a pattern, and patterns are what grand juries are for. I went to my supervisor on Monday morning. I told I had attended a social event over the weekend and observed a person of interest in the active investigation. I told her about the connection to my father's firm. I told her everything, in the order it happened, the way I would tell it to a judge. She was quiet for a moment. Then she asked if I needed to recuse myself. I had thought about that all weekend. I had sat with it. The answer was genuinely complicated, and I won't pretend it wasn't. My father was not a target. I had not known before that evening that there was any connection to Carmichael Capital. The investigation had begun entirely independently. And I was the one who had flagged the connection rather than remaining silent, which would have been the easier thing and the more dangerous one. No, I said. But I want everything documented, every step from this point. Time-stamped and in writing. She nodded. Done. The documentation is why I'm still on the case. The documentation is also, I suspect, the reason my father's attorney called mine 3 months later, trying to understand the scope of a grand jury subpoena that had arrived at Carmichael Capital's offices on a Thursday morning in October. My attorney. She is excellent, and she is not someone to be charmed or pressured, called me after. She said, "Your father's people are asking if there's anything personal in this." I said, "There's nothing personal in this." And I meant it. Or I meant it mostly. I am honest enough to know that I am not a perfect instrument. I am a human being who spent her whole life not being introduced by name at tables full of her father's guests, and I would be lying if I said that had no texture to it, no weight. But the case was real. The fraud was real. The people who had lost money, some of them retirement accounts, some of them small institutional investors who trusted the fund's disclosures, were real. That is what I went to work for. That is what I was doing. My father called me in November. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened to the message 4 times, sitting in my parked car outside my office building in the rain. He did not mention the subpoena. He said he hoped I was doing well. He said he'd been thinking about the gala, that it was good to see me. He said, and I had to replay this part because I wasn't sure I'd heard it. "I think I've handled some things badly, Tessa." He said my name. First time I could remember him saying it on a recording in a long time. I sat with that for a while. Then I went back inside and kept working. The indictment came down in February. It named Gordon Shea, 2 of his business partners, and the corporate attorney who had acted as registered agent for 3 of the shell entities. It did not name my father. The investigation into Carmichael Capital's connection to those entities is ongoing, which means it is neither closed nor charged, and I cannot say more than that. What I can say is that my father retained outside counsel in December and that the firm has been quiet in ways it wasn't before. My stepbrother sent me an email in March. It was 4 lines long. The last line said, "I don't know why you did this." I started a reply 3 times and deleted all 3. The 4th time I tried, I wrote, "I did my job." I sat with that for 2 days. Then I sent it. My mother came to visit in April. We made pasta and watched a movie we both already seen. And at some point she looked at me across the couch and said, "You okay?" I thought about all the dinners where I had not been introduced by name. I thought about the gala and the sparkling water and the 11 minutes by the east windows. I thought about voicemail in the rain. "I'm okay," I said. She looked at me the way mothers look when they are deciding whether to press. Then she looked back at the screen. "You did the right thing," she said to the movie, not to me. "I know," I said. "That's the part no one really prepares you for. Doing the right thing doesn't feel like triumph. It doesn't feel like the moment at the end of a movie where the music swells and the person who wronged you finally understands. It feels like pasta on a Tuesday. It feels like a voicemail you listen to 4 times in the rain and then don't return. It feels like knowing your own name, carrying it yourself, not waiting for someone else to say it in a room full of people. I have a hearing on Thursday. I need to be sharp. I have been preparing since Monday and I will prepare through tonight. But I'm taking a few minutes first, just to say this. My name is Tessa Carmichael. I am a federal prosecutor for the Southern District of New York. I have never needed anyone to say that for me. I only needed to stop waiting for them to... I've thought a lot about what actually happened that night at the Mandarin Oriental. Not the legal part. I understand that part cleanly. I mean the part underneath it. The part that took me longer to name. My father made a calculation about me every time he stood at a table full of people he wanted to impress. He calculated that I was not useful to that impression. And so he softened me, in-law, my daughter, that pause, until I was small enough to fit in the background without disrupting anything. He did that for years. He may not have known he was doing it. That almost makes it worse. What I've learned, not from this case, but from the accumulation of every choice I made that led me to be standing at that bar with a glass of sparkling water when Gordon Shea turned and I saw his face, is that the decisions you make in private are the only ones that actually define you. Nobody saw me time those 11 minutes by the east windows. Nobody knew what I was doing when I looked away after 3 seconds. Nobody at that gala would have guessed that the woman in the navy dress who smiled politely and excused herself to get a drink was building a case in her head that would take 4 months to move and reshape the firm her father had spent 22 years constructing. That is what integrity actually looks like, not the speech, not the moment the indictment lands, the 11 minutes, the sparkling water, the text to Daniel at 10:47 on a Saturday night that started with the facts and nothing else. I think about Tessa, about myself, at 9 years old in that Bethesda apartment, and I understand now that the training started there, not in law school, not at the bar exam. There. My mother worked as a paralegal and made sure I had books, and what she was actually teaching me without naming it was that you do not wait for someone to hand you the authority to act like yourself. You practice it quietly, in small rooms, until it becomes the only thing you know how to do. My father confused power with position. He thought that because he controlled the introduction, he controlled the narrative. He stood at podiums and said his son's name with pride and thought that was the shape of legacy. What he didn't understand is that legacy isn't what you announce. It's what survives the announcement. It's what's still standing when the folder opens and the hand starts shaking. I don't say this to be hard on him. I say it because I think it's true and I think it matters, and I think a lot of people spend their whole lives waiting for the person who dismissed them to finally see them clearly. And that is a long wait, and it costs more than it's worth. The document in that folder was real because I did real work. The agents arrived because Daniel and I spent 4 months being careful and precise and honest about what we could and couldn't prove. Gordon Shea was indicted because the facts were there to indict him, not because I wanted something from any of this beyond what the law required. What you put into the world with care tends to surface eventually, not always on your timeline, not always in the form you expected. But the work doesn't disappear. It goes somewhere. And the shortcuts you take, the ones my father took, the ones Gordon Shea took, every small compromise made in the belief that no one was paying attention, those go somewhere too. My name is Tessa Carmichael. I said it myself at 33 in a parked car in the rain because I finally understood that I had always been the one responsible for carrying it. That's the only thing I'd tell anyone who's listening. Carry your own name, do the work in the quiet, the rest follows.